Today, I will present the research findings on a topic study on current supply of identified agriculture and livestock commodities for school and hospital feeding program in Bhutan. In this presentation, I will talk on following sections. The first one is background on school and hospital feeding program, followed by objectives of the study, materials and methodology, results and discussion of this study, conclusion and recommendations. First of all, I would like to set the context of this research study. School and hospital feeding program in Bhutan is not new. The World Food Program supported school feeding program since 1974 in Bhutan. As we all know that Bhutan will soon graduate from least developing country to developing countries by 2023, this indicates that foreign donors will withdraw their financial support to Bhutan. Therefore, the Royal Government of Bhutan initiated and rolled out this ambitious program called School and Hospital Feeding Program in July 2019. This program covered 263 schools with more than 78,000 students. The program has different stipend schemes for the students. The government worked out the estimated budget of nearly 3.22 billion for this program initially, and this program is also expected to generate employment for almost 5,000 youths under state-owned enterprises, farmers groups, youth groups, cooperatives in next 5 years. In many countries, especially underdeveloped and least developing countries, school and hospital feeding program has proven to be effective in terms of enrollment, retention, overall psychological development, and nutritional supplementation for the beneficiaries. Similarly, as per the concept note on School and Hospital Feeding Program 2019, the main aim is to meet the demand of identified food commodities through domestic production in the schools and hospitals throughout the country in Bhutan. On the other hand, the deficit supply is fulfilled through import, mainly from India. The concept paper on school and hospital feeding program outlines that there are 4 different major groups of food commodities, mainly fruits, vegetables, livestock product, and cereals, to be supplied to the schools and hospitals. Ever since this program was rolled out in the country, it has become crucial for the researchers to assess on following objectives. The first one is to assess the current production of selected agricultural commodities in the country under school and hospital feeding program, followed by mapping out the geographical production and production capacity as per the Dzongkhag wise. The third objective of this study was to provide general recommendations for increasing productions and real-time documentation of agriculture and livestock commodities. In order to achieve the objectives of the study, these were the following materials and methodologies implemented or used during the research study. The secondary data were mainly collected from Bhutan Renewable Natural Resource Stats 2019. Indeed, the study was basically confined to text review, and on the other hand, further, these data collected were validated through telephonic interviews and comparative analysis of the data reported in annual progress reports of selected Dzongkhag agriculture sectors. The data were analyzed using descriptive statistics in Excel and were presented in the forms of tables, graphs, percentages, averages, etc. The data collected were analyzed and were mainly presented in four categories. The first one is fruits. So under school and hospital feeding program, there were 11 numbers of fruits identified. Similarly, 13 numbers of vegetables, followed by livestock products, which were mainly meat products, milk and value-added dairy products. And finally, the last section was cereals. Under fruits, you can clearly see here that there is a considerable volume of production, but however, it was found that Bhutan imported more than 1,300 metric ton of fruits in 2019, which indicates that the actual production did not meet the domestic demand for fruits in Bhutan. When we present the production, export and import trend of fruits in 2019, we can very well see here that amongst 11 fruits identified, orange, the production of orange was the highest, and if you look at the trend of export, it was negligible. And if you look at the trend of import, you can see here that Bhutan has imported almost all the fruits. Similar to the fruits, this table shows the 13 number of identified vegetables under school and hospital feeding program. As per the Bhutan RNR stats 2019, it was found that chili topped in production with more than 7,000 metric ton in 2019. And you can see here from the table that Bhutan has exported 2,608 metric tons of cabbage. And then in terms of, if you compare between export and import, you can see here that Bhutan imported more than 5,000 metric tons of vegetables in the year 2019 alone. The data on production, export and import of vegetables were presented in the form of graph. You can see here that though there is a considerable amount or volume of production, but the export was very negligible from this graph. Under livestock products, meat was one of the major commodities. You can see there are around 6 different types of meat products produced or either imported in the 2019. In terms of domestic production, chicken was the highest, and if you look at the total domestic production and the import, you can see here that Bhutan imported 2 times the actual domestic production or domestically produced in the country. The status on domestic production and import were further analyzed and presented in the form of graph. You can see among 6 different meat products, the import of beef was the highest with more than 3,500 metric ton in 2019, and it is clearly seen here that the domestic production could not meet the domestic demand for meat products in the country. This slide presents the data for other livestock products, mainly milk, egg, cheese and yogurt. This slide presents the data on cereals and tuber products. As you can see clearly here on this slide, the import of paddy or rice stands at more than 80,000 metric ton in 2019, and if you look at the export is very minimal or negligible for these 3 commodities. In the previous slides, we presented the volumes of production, export and import of food commodities. Therefore, it is interesting to present here the monetary value or money spent on import of food commodities. Out of 4 groups of food commodities, the cereal topped in terms of money value, which stands at more than 2,500 million kilograms, followed by 1,282 million kilograms for livestock products, and 81 million kilograms were spent on import of vegetables, followed by 41.58 million kilograms on vegetables in 2019 alone. In the earlier slides, we presented the background, status on the production, import, export, and monetary value on import of food commodities. This is because upon analysis, we found out that the export of different food commodities identified under school and hospital feeding program was negligible, and from this study we concluded the following general and specific conclusions. The first one is the domestic production of identified food commodities were inadequate and could not meet the domestic demand. Hence, the Royal Government of Bhutan in 2019 has imported food commodities mainly from India. If we calculate in terms of percentage, Bhutan imported 63.02% of total rice consumed in the country, which corresponded to 84,854 metric ton. Similarly, 88.57% of beef, 45.86% of chicken, more than 80% of fish, and 60% of pork were imported in the country. Under fruits and vegetables, it was found that 1,300 metric tons of fruits were imported. Similarly, 16.17% of vegetables, which accounted to more than 5,400 metric tons of vegetables, were imported. And we can also conclude here that on comparison between export and import, the export of food commodities was found to be negligible or insignificant, both in terms of volume and monetary value. Therefore, it's quite interesting to note here and conclude that Bhutan spent 3,913 million kilograms on import of food commodities, mainly to India in 2019 alone. Therefore, it is a concern to note that Bhutan mainly depended on import of food commodities from India. From this study, the following recommendations may be recommended to upscale the domestic production of food commodities. The first one is the study to update the realistic production data of agriculture and livestock products may be undertaken. This is because, for example, the production data for rice and maize were calculated using formula as reported in the document. Second one is the impact assessment of school and hospital feeding program, which was rolled out in 2019, needs to be conducted. And the third one is the study to increase the production of food commodities through effective government interventions to reduce the import is also recommended. Finally, it is important to recommend here to take up the trend analysis of food import and implications on the economy of country. This is because Bhutan has spent a huge amount of money, as high as 3,900 million, on the import of different food commodities identified under school and hospital feeding program. So with this, we would like to thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.